Good morning, everyone. My name is Vivien Gyuris, and I'm representing NESTI Play, a social enterprise from Hungary. Our mission is to provide quality early childhood education to all children worldwide, and we would like to achieve this in inclusive classroom settings. I was dealing with inclusive education in the past 20 years in the framework of different international organizations like the World Bank for 14 years and the United Nations, different agencies, and the Council of Europe. Somehow I was always dealing with atypical children, those children who were somehow outside of the system. They were showing different developmental paths. And also in my personal life, I've got a Christoph, a child who is highly atypical with lots of behavioral issues. He has focusing issues. He's very difficult to motivate, but he's highly intelligent. He's been outside of the system. He fell from the system 3 times already, and hopefully he will remain now in this school environment for a longer term. But as we can see, there are atypical children in different contexts. In disadvantaged social groups, and we can also say that there are children with disabilities who are also considered atypical, children with developmental disorders, delays, or with extreme behaviors. Or sometimes we also have children who demonstrate all of these symptoms that we see here. At NESTI Play, we very much support the early learning and the social inclusion of these atypical children. About NESTI Play, we are providing capacity building to teachers in pre-primary education and also in primary schools, both in disadvantaged communities and in mainstream communities. In the past 2 years, since we are a new organization just recently founded, we have provided over 100 trainings to over 100 kindergartens, reaching out to over 1,000 kindergarten teachers or primary school teachers. And half of them were in disadvantaged social groups, mainly in the northeastern part of Hungary. At NESTI Play, we have different kinds of services all around these children. We have, as I mentioned, capacity building for teachers and also for parents. We also concentrate on the physical settings that are around these atypical children or any children, like playgrounds. We have specially designed outdoor inclusive playground equipment which promote playing together. And we also have a methodology which comes with the actual physical equipment. We also noticed that in schools, the free play time is when the most conflicts occur. When children who are atypical, who are a bit different, they just don't know how to connect with other people, or they get into conflict, or get bullied, or they become the ones who bully. So we also have a special program which designs the school break, the recess area, with the invisible guidance of informed adults. We also have an online database of over 365 online sensory-based play activities that could be played within school settings, kindergarten or primary schools, but also at home with parents in group settings. They all have a kind of a developmental purpose to develop one or another ability or skill area. We also noticed in our work that those children who are a bit atypical and they have bothering behavior, they are left out from the fun. They are invited to birthday parties once or twice, but not for the 3rd time. And for this reason, we had to also come up with some kind of a solution. So we came up with the NESTI Play Hub, which is a safe place for any child, any children, to play together, to celebrate birthday parties. And we have our special animators who are guiding these activities so that no conflicts occur during the parties, and everybody can return home with positive, pleasant memories. And finally, which is the basis for all our programs, is a partnership. It's a partnership of all the key players within the micro communities that are around these children, to support them and to give them continuous feedback. So let me then start focusing on what I would like to talk a bit with a bit more detail today. And it is the problem that the number of atypical children is growing. It is growing because of the social, economic, environmental issues, because of like the pandemic, like migration, like the technological advancement. More and more children are showing different developmental path. The brain is working in a different way. Also, the pandemic did disrupt the education of 90% of the children worldwide, which caused tremendous learning losses. Already before the pandemic, there was a crisis in education. And right now, during, and we still cannot see the aftermath of the crisis, the gaps, ability gaps, and education outcome gaps widened significantly, and those who were hit the hardest were the children from disadvantaged communities. When we were working in the pandemic, we had to put all our training courses online so that we could continue with our work. However, we noticed that Zoom unfortunately decreased the quality of our services. We also noticed that despite the connection that we had online virtually, teachers were really showing symptoms of getting highly exhausted, stressed and burned out, and losing enthusiasm and losing the drive that they had before. And they also lacked the knowledge, the technical knowledge and competencies to operate in a remote or hybrid environment. So we could see that there was a need on the side of the teachers that we might have to do something with. So we came up with the idea of NESTI. And NESTI is an app, is a low-cost app to support pre- and primary teachers anywhere in the world. This app constitutes the cornerstone of all our methodology, because how we work is that when a kindergarten teacher enters a room with new students in, they do a kind of an assessment of the children's key ability areas in a week or so, and they receive a kind of a picture, a visualization of the child's abilities in these 5 areas. And then they start designing the curriculum based on the certain child's weaknesses and strengths in those ability areas. But this kind of method, we just could not transmit through Zoom or Skype or whatever premises. That's why we came up with NESTI. So NESTI allows any teacher anywhere in the world, in Kenya or in India or even in Hungary, to in a week to start observing the students in their group and do these kinds of assessments in the 5 areas. And then the system kind of draws tips and tricks, which are suggestions from us on how to include atypical children in group activities, and also certain play activities from our online play bank that I just mentioned previously. And also it has a third function of linking teachers and parents together so that they would have the same understanding of the children and they could together do different activities at home and also in school settings. And ultimately what we are planning is to develop an AI-supported platform where experts, practitioners, and parents can find solutions to real problems in early childhood education through reviewed and rated comments. NESTI is important because early detection and early intervention is very important. And it is especially important for disadvantaged children. The earlier we detect an atypical development, the earlier we can do measures to start closing the developmental gaps of those children so that they can start school with a much more solid background and foundation. And also quality early childhood education, as we all know, contributes to reduced dropouts, increased learning outcomes, and better social inclusion and higher educational goals. All these outcomes and all these goals are very much endangered in disadvantaged social groups where children have little or limited access to early childhood education. At Nesting Play, this is what we are actually doing. We are teaching, we are enabling teachers through NESTI, but also in person, offline, to detect early developmental gaps and deficits and design their curriculum-based daily activities, addressing the diverse ability profile of their students, and provide the necessary targeted measures to improve the affected deficit areas in inclusive classroom settings, not taking children out and provide development or individual services outside in the corridor or in a separate room, but all together with his or her peers in inclusive classroom settings. And this approach has a neuroscience background, as we all know, how the brain functions. I don't really want to talk too much about this. Maybe the most important thing is that the 80% of the brain develops before the age of 5, but it is also open and it is capable for further developing until we die. Children who start behind stay behind. So this is the whole idea behind early childhood education, why we need to pay very strong attention to closing at very early age the developmental gaps. Because if we start dedicating time enough, then later on, when the children reaches youth and teenager age, they might not end up considered as antisocial or even having criminal behavior. This is a very extreme example, but many times it happens when children do not receive the necessary attention. And also many of you have said already that the environment, the surrounding environment impact on the children is just as decisive as the genetical additions of the children. So poverty can be considered as trauma, and which does leave some marks on the development of the brain. And of course, this makes it even harder for disadvantaged children to produce the results which can be considered as gifted. Of course, if there are connections positive with adults, meaningful adults, these kind of traumatic environments, the impact of this could be significantly reduced. That's why we also believe in mentorship, in long-term mentorship for disadvantaged children that can really compensate for the effects and impacts of the environment in gifted education. We also noticed in our experience that even if a child is gifted, he or she may still experience some learning difficulties, or there are some delays or gaps in his or her development. So what we are doing with teachers is we are teaching them a certain mindset so that they should always look behind the behavior and look for the causes. And that's why is it important to build the solid foundations for children to explore the world and to get to know the world around them. And also how to make children get accepted by the community so that their self-esteem and confidence can grow, and eventually they can become accepted by the overall community. So NESTI is a tool. It's a very simple tool, accessible to any teachers in Hungarian, English, and Spanish languages to assess children's abilities in 5 areas, which are the motoric, communication, sensory integration and perception, play, free play, and language. This is available for anyone. It is a very low-cost app, and it allows teachers also to monitor children's progress in these areas in a longer term time. it kind of gives a picture on the child. This is a kind of the visualization of a child's abilities. So the teacher can see exactly that, for example, that child in language skills is at the age of 3 or at the age of his age or above his or her above his age. So it can see, the teacher can see that in certain areas the child is below or above the age level requirements and standards that are set by internationally set milestones. Maybe our key message, just for closing, is that it's very important to detect early developmental gaps or developmental alterations, because then we can intervene much earlier and maybe provide a much bigger pool also for talents to emerge if we have a much more solid foundation in key abilities, skills, and competencies. The inclusive education of atypical children is very important, since this is how our society is composed of. If we take them out to segregated institutions, they will never be able to get, once they leave the institution, become full members of an integrated society. And as I also said, atypical children represent a great human capital potential. And let the system adjust to these diverse learners, instead the children to the system. And maybe just a very final thought, from the perspective of talent, talent identification and talent education, it is very important to have a larger pool of talents, of children with more solid backgrounds. So maybe talent education should start as early as possible with the very basic concept of early childhood education, accessible for any child anywhere in the world. And for that, the participation and the role of teachers and parents and the partnership of all the actors in the micro community is essential. And then, as we can see in the numbers and the statistics, these children who are showing atypical development and those who are highly gifted, maybe twice exceptional with some behavior issues, is growing exponentially. So what it is now considered atypical will be the typical in the very near future. Thank you very much.